All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. As we indicated, we have two topics for conversation this morning. One, of course, is on 2 years of COVID-19 in Nigeria, lessons learned and others. But the first that we're going to be dealing with is the ongoing process in getting the fifth alteration to the 1999 Constitution. We have two guests with us here in the studio. Cynthia Mbamalu, she's Program Director of IAGA Africa and a regular guest in Good Morning Nigeria. Cynthia, welcome to the program.
Good morning.
Okay. And we also have joining us via Zoom, Professor Muhammad Kabir Isa, a Professor of Governance in the Department of Local Government and Development Studies, Faculty of Administration, Ahmadu Bello University in Zaria. Professor Isa, also another regular guest of Good Morning Nigeria, delighted to have you on the program.
Good morning, Nigeria. It's a pleasure to be back on Good Morning Nigeria.
Okay, let's begin the conversation with you, Professor Isa. We saw the National Assembly yesterday deal with a slate of bills to amend the Constitution. Senate passed 49 of them. One, of course, which touches on the independence of the local government system, of which, of course, you are an expert. But give us your overview of this whole exercise in getting the fifth alteration through the assembly process.
Thank you very much. Basically, if you look back into history, there have been, in the past National Assembly, there have been several attempts to amend the Constitution. Way back, I think, in 2007, 8, 9, and thereabout. There have been about 3 attempts to amend the Constitution in a remarkable, very significant way. However, the processes often get scuttled at the state houses of assembly. In fact, the last but one, it was the State House of Assembly that scuttled the entire processes. And in every attempt to amend significantly the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, we have a State House of Assemblies, that do not understand the yearnings and the aspirations of Nigerians. And unfortunately, the caliber of people we have at the State House of Assemblies leave a lot to be desired in terms of their perceptions, in terms of their understanding, and in terms of, the way they reason. And it has a lot to do with the type of people and the quality of people we vote into the State House of Assembly. I did a study for Chatham House in 2016 on the political underdevelopment of the Northeastern state. And we discovered that in all the states of the Northeast, the states houses of assembly are rubber stamps houses of assembly. They barely understood what their role are in terms of making laws and making provisions for the development of their various communities and societies that they represent at the State House of Assembly. So it's unfortunate that the bulk of the basis of our political underdevelopment is linked to the State House of Assembly, and the political parties. We don't have political parties. What we have in Nigeria are political associations, a coalition of interest without ideology, without principle, without focus, and without direction. So it's unfortunate that our political parties throw up candidates that are going there to be rubber stamps. And the processes through which we recruit actors to go into the State House of Assembly is questionable. And I think this should be the subject of even constitutional amendment, that the political parties come up with recruitment processes, because the elites who control political parties are not interested in the quality of people who go, particularly at the local government level and at the State House of Assemblies, because they want people that they can control, they can manipulate, while they go to the center and determine what happens at the center. Everything about this constitutional process is laudable, is, something to be reckoned with, is something to be cherished. However, like you rightly observe, our problem and challenge of this constitutional process is that it will be scuttled, it will be truncated, it will be usurped and hijacked at the State House of Assembly. And I can bet you that we are not likely to get that to third at the State House of Assemblies. And that's my take on the entire process of the constitutional amendment. It's unfortunate that our political parties do not have a good understanding of what they are supposed to do. You can't compare political parties today and political parties in the between 79 and 80s, because you can talk about MPN, you know the direction of MPN, you know the ideological leaning of MPN. When you look at UPN, between UPN and MPN, you can tell that UPN is a social democratic party, while the MPN is a Republican party. PRP, for example, you can tell that PRP is a people's party. It's like a socialist-oriented party. MPP, you can tell the direction, and so on. But when you look at our APC, you look at PDP, you look at what you have today, it's a coalition of political groups, an association, but they are not political parties. In fact, they do not measure with all the indices and indicators of political party anywhere in the world. So people come in and brandish all sorts of things. We don't have political parties. I accept we have political association made up of political groups, a coalition of interests, but not people who are there to champion the interests of Nigeria.
Okay, Professor Issa, thank you. Thank you. We just put you on hold for a while and return to you. Let's come back to the studio. Cynthia is here with us. Cynthia, I'd like for you to look at how they voted, how the lawmakers voted, 68 of those bills. And in looking at how they voted, I want you to look at also the content of the bills, vis-a-vis relevance to our democratic progress.
Yeah, very important conversation. And I think I liked the conversation from Prof when he talked about parties. Our parties do not necessarily reflect ideologies. Why? Members of the National Assembly represent the parties, and major representation is from the All Progressive Congress and the People's Democratic Party. So you would expect that proposals that are either progressive in nature or promote democracy will receive some level of consideration. And we don't see that totally. We had some wins, but we had major fails also. What were some of those wins? At least conversation around universal basic education, proposing that the right to primary education would become a fundamental right. So moving into Chapter 4 of the Constitution to make it a fundamental right for all children. That is an important provision that was passed. Convention around local government autonomy also, both financial autonomy and administrative autonomy were also important provisions that were passed, because consistently we've talked about the need to ensure an independent autonomous local government as a tier of government. And we already had conversation this morning around the state assemblies being appendages of government. Local government was even worse, because almost they did not exist unless the governors wanted them to exist. So it's an important proposal that made it in. However, if you look at the several other proposals that were presented, issues around gender, for instance, those were important bills that did not receive the kinds of support that was expected. As simple as citizenship, and I always talk about citizenship. Why was citizenship bill very important? Because the Constitution in our preamble already says that we, the people, will resolve that that our Constitution would promote principles of freedom, equality, and justice. It's clearly stated in the Constitution. But if you go to the rights of citizenship, only Nigerian men can confer citizenship to foreign wives. What this means is that women and men are not seen as equal citizens, because if only one sex can confer to their foreign partners, it means the other section, which are the women, why can't they confer citizenship to their foreign partners? And this is a provision that they voted against, because we wanted to level it up to ensure that as long as you're a citizen, if you marry a foreign partner, as you have in other countries, that partner can have citizenship. So conversation around also legislative representation. Now, why was this important? We needed to have a proposal to create seats for women because of the decline in women representation. And democracy is about representation, is about inclusion. But consistently, we've seen the processes of elections, from the party primaries to elections. Women contest, but they lose out. Even from convention, women contest for executive offices in parties, but they lose out. You only have maybe the women leader. Those are the positions you have reserved for at the party level. So in government and party level, you don't see inclusion. And we were expecting that at least a party like the APC that has majority, or the PDP that has majority members, that these are proposals they would adopt, because their constitution commits to promoting equality and women inclusion. If you read the constitution of these two parties, actually. So, but we saw the way they voted against the bill for women representation in the legislative houses, at the National and State Assembly. Let us bear in mind that this bill was the only bill that would have ensured that Nigeria would have assemblies with at least 3 women. Currently in Nigeria, 15 states or 36 states do not have female lawmakers. So there are 15 state assemblies where there is no woman as a lawmaker. And we think that is progress. In the 21st century, 23 years of democracy this year, that is problematic. But now this bill has failed. Go to appointive offices also. It did not make it. But interestingly, independent candidacy made it. However, we don't know how that would fare at the state level, because at least what independent candidacy does is, because we know we have a faulty political party system, individuals with capacity and competence who do not connect with any of these parties can run as independents. That way, you can also have better options for young people, even for women, for PWDs, for people with capacity to contest for office. So that also was an important provision that made it at the voting yesterday.
I didn't want to, sorry, because I didn't want to interrupt you. Actually, I didn't also want you to take on the issue of the gender now. I wanted us to quickly exhaust, the other bills, but fair enough. Enlighten me about the citizenship, and how it affects spouses from other countries, knowing very well that our system here is, male gender friendly. It's, patriarchal.
Yeah, so the idea for citizenship, why was that very important? We're not saying that a lot of Nigerian men want to marry foreign husbands, for instance, but it's the spirit behind that provision, that citizenship should be a right that every Nigerian enjoys. So if you're entitled to things as citizens, everyone should be entitled to that. So what this provision does, Section 26 of the Constitution, what it does is says only women married to citizens can become citizens if they by registration. So there are specific provisions for you to achieve to become a citizen by registration if you marry a Nigerian man. So you have that option, which is why you have a lot of Nigerian men who actually have foreign wives who after a period of time become citizens. But for women, we don't have that right. So what that section basically does is says, women, you're not citizen enough to confer citizenship to your foreign spouse. What it means is, if for women who marry foreign husbands, no matter how well their husbands have lived with them, no matter how much tax they've paid, how well behaved they are, they cannot become citizens.
To your husband's place.
That is another country, but we want to be Nigerians.
Anyway, you're talking about equity.
We are talking about being Nigerian. Being Nigerian is the basic of our citizenship. Do you want Nigerian women to leave the country to become citizens of other countries? That's the question here. We want to be Nigerian citizens.
Well, Cynthia, thank you very much for your explanation. And just to indicate, because when lawmakers are voting, they don't necessarily state the reason why they are voting. They may have done their prior research, and then, of course, you have all kinds of influences, cultural and otherwise. There were a number of African countries that had similar rules, if you like, of citizenship. In Zimbabwe, for instance, in the past, I'm not sure what the new constitutional arrangements are. If you were a lady, a female Zimbabwean, married to a foreigner, your foreign spouse didn't have the right to Zimbabwean citizenship. That was in Zimbabwe. But you were explaining the exclusion of women from the elective process. That's to say, the special seats that were designed or proposed, if you like, for women. And we had a conversation around that subject matter some time ago. And it seemed as if, yes, fine proposal to make, but at a time when the country was also concerned about the cost of governance, it was clear that if you implemented that special seats for women, which would have meant, at the way it was couched, you would have enlarged the size first of the Senate, and then enlarged the size of the House of Reps, enlarged the size of the state Houses of Assembly. Some of the lawmakers might have felt, hey, listen, we can't deal with this at the moment. Isn't there some compensation, therefore, through the independent candidacy that they have now voted for?
Well, with all the consultations, the issue of cost was not an issue. In fact, this was the most welcomed bill from our engagement in the constitutional review process from every assembly. Why? Because they had felt this bill did not threaten their seats. And if you realize, in the House of Reps, this bill had the Speaker as the co-sponsor, and 85 members sponsored this bill, because this was one bill that received a lot of affirmative support at the passing the process. So it was not a question. And on budget, an analysis was done, and the cost that it would have incurred was less than 1% of the 2021 budget. And if you know, 2021 budget is less than the current budget for this year. And in fact, if you cut out the waste and all the leakages in the budget, it was going to fit in. We had done a lot of analysis, and that was why it was welcomed. So there were arguments for that. But yes, there's an opportunity in independent candidacy. But we know the last assembly, the 8th assembly, it passed at the national, but also did not make it to the state. So while we have an opportunity there, independent candidacy does not necessarily guarantee that women would win. It gives women opportunities. It may be a compensation, but it does not put Nigeria in the global space as a country that is committed to promoting women inclusion, with all the instruments to sign on to, and with all the commitments from the president, the Senate president, the speaker, and all the members of the House, especially in this month of March, which is the month of the women. So it was like National Assembly said no to women in the Women's Month. I don't know what else is as loud as that. And I think it's important that Nigerian women reunite and come back together, because there's a protest today. And we want National Assembly to understand that we do not appreciate taking for granted, because during elections, you need our votes. During elections, women organize campaign. Women are the reason a lot of lawmakers make it back to the National Assembly. So because of that, we want them to understand that you don't keep saying no to women every assembly. When will you say yes to Nigerian women?
They tell you these things are not done based on sentiments, gender sentiments or gender,
It's democratic.
It has to be scientific. You must, know what is at risk and what is on the table. So let me ask, maybe Professor Kabiru Issa will probably give us an insight into why, when it comes to gender bills, issues about gender, granting special seats or upping female representation in the National Assembly, it becomes an issue. Is there anything that we really do not understand, despite all the consultations and advocacies and affirmative response that Cynthia says, was received at the preliminary stages? So what do you think happened at the National Assembly?
Thank you once more. I think we are not looking at the problem from the root of the problem, really. The National Assembly makes laws, and the National Assembly cannot be making laws for every little problem. Really, the problem is from the political parties. The National Assembly can make laws for affirmative action, that political parties, because members of the National Assembly are supposed to be recruited from a political party. So political parties are the ones to implement affirmative action. So we can make a law, and this is why the problem of that law keeps reoccurring. When you insist that, certain seats in the National Assembly must be, specifically designated for women or for a particular category of people. Rather, as a principle, the National Assembly can make laws that, look, the National Assembly in Nigeria is passing this law in Nigeria that at every level of government, there must be affirmative action. For example, we talk about quota system. There is no law that says that quota system must be distributed like this or in this pattern. But the law insists that there must be quota in every distribution of offices. Likewise, we can have a law that spells out that there must be affirmative action at every level and stage of government. But, members of the National Assembly come to the National Assembly through political parties. They are the vehicles for the proper implementation of affirmative action. Now, women are a larger chunk of the voting bloc They must use their power. They must use their bloc. Men don't vote like women do. The bulk of voters are women. So women must use their power to get what they want, because power does not come on a platter of gold. It does not come from the house. It comes from affirmative action, from group, from association, from bloc movement. They must form a movement and demand that political parties must field female candidates in their candidature for election at certain level. So this is where the problem lies. I feel it's the political parties. They are playing the ostrich by pushing the problem to the National Assembly. It's just like saying that we have the National Assembly making laws for how parties elect. National Assembly can make general laws, not specific laws. I personally do not see why National Assembly should dictate to how political parties conduct their elections, conduct their affairs. It is a matter of principle for the political parties. So we must insist that political parties must do things in certain ways. After all, if you look at what are the roles of political parties in democratic society, our political parties do not fit in anywhere. They do not stand the test of time. They do not even measure in any way, because in a democratic society, there are no imposition. There are no godfatherism. All those negative drawbacks that are factors of underdevelopment are hallmarks of our political parties and the party existence in Nigeria. So we don't have political parties. What we have is political association. And therefore, they cannot...
Professor Issa, let me pause you there and throw this into the conversation. In jurisprudence, when you're looking at the organic nature of laws, laws are more efficacious when they grow from the mores and habits and culture of a people, rather than seeking to transplant or impose a law. Yes, you can, in deserving instances, impose a law as an instrument, to engineer social change. But persons would argue that the conservative nature of our society, and therefore some of the disposition you saw in the course of the voting, might have brought this about. We were making some progress. Let's not make any mistake about it. And over the past 10 years or more, we've had women who have been in charge of the Nigerian economy as finance ministers. There was a time you could count no fewer than 8 or 10 women who were in cabinet. You also had quite a sizable number in the National Assembly and in some state houses of assembly. What went wrong? Was it a matter of not having the piece of legislation, or women just were pushed to the sidelines? Can we get the political parties on their own? Because we discussed this after the APC Women Conference, and they said at their convention, which is coming up later this month, they have a slate of demands to make. So is it therefore advisable to say, okay, let this grow from the habits and practices of political parties, and before you know it, it then becomes almost the new normal to say, look, you must have women. And after a while, if you need to codify it, you go to the Constitution. Cynthia.
Well, let's understand that you're right. Sometimes laws, it's more effective when it's organic. However, there's also the conventional laws as instruments of social engineering. Why? Because if you always wait for the people to have a consensus on issues, you may not have specific legislation. It's almost like abolition of things as simple as the killing of twins years back. If we waited for a culture as called, not just that, FGM, all the things we fight against that are horrible. If you were waiting for the culture of the people, it would have taken a longer time, but you needed to make a law to enforce it. Why? Because when you make a law, it creates legal mandate. And that is why this for women conversation is important. So let's think about appointments. You were right. Once upon a time, we almost had 30% women, almost 30% in the cabinet. If you remember that, as far back as before 2015, even 2011, yeah. However, These numbers dropped this time around. Why? Because there was no law to mandate it. So only when there's political will that you see improvement.
Cynthia, I have to cut to you. I'm sorry. I know you mentioned earlier on that there is a peaceful protest by women. So we'll just allow you, and I'm sure that we'll return to this topic, to discuss it at more elaborate form. Thank you very much, Cynthia Mbamalu, for coming. And we'd also like to appreciate Mohammed Kabir Isa. Professor, thank you very much. The points you raised are very germane, very vital, and I'm sure Cynthia also has taken note of some of those few things. Thank you very much, and do have a good day.
It's a pleasure being with you.
All right, this is Good Morning Nigeria. Don't go away. We'll be right back with our second topic. It's 2 years of COVID-19 in Nigeria. What have we learned, and what is the future of public health? Just in a moment.